Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. This is Sare Liz, or as some know me, Mother Sare, and I've got a sermon for you today. The quality is a bit different than this intro because it was recorded during a worship service. These are audio-only recordings because that's what's manageable at this time. For more details concerning when, where, and what bits of the Bible were being preached on, look to the description below this video. I hope you enjoy the message. Here we go.
This morning's gospel gives us a tiny chunk, two little stories, in the midst of a long line of little stories that Jesus is telling his disciples about, well, let me put it this way. Every story that Jesus is telling in this series, they seem unrelated, but they have at least this that draws them together. Things don't work out in the story the way you would imagine they would. Jesus ends up setting you up to expect something and then turning you on your head. And, Jesus does do this other places in the gospel, so this is not totally unexpected. But in the midst of telling these little stories about how God gives us the unexpected, the disciples say, would you increase our faith then? And Jesus turns the tables on them again and said, if you had any faith at all, if you had faith the size of the tiniest seed we use here, and if you've ever made pickles, you know exactly how big mustard seeds are. They're not large, but they're bigger than, say, poppy seeds. They're bigger than sesame seeds. They're just not like peppercorns. But if you had the faith of this tiny seed, that if I were holding one here, you wouldn't be able to see it, then you could say, and I'm sure at this point he was walking by a mulberry tree, you could say to this little tree here, be uprooted and plant yourself in the sea, and it would do it. Those are harsh words. And we've interpreted those words in both harsh ways and softer ways all throughout history for the following 20 centuries. We have tried to make what Jesus said in that moment pleasanter. But this is in the midst of him trying to shake his disciples up, trying to get them out of their complacency. Have you ever tried to do that to a friend? Have you ever tried to give them a reality check and the gentle things aren't working and they keep whining and you just say to them, would you just look at reality? If you had any desire whatsoever to change, your situation would already be different. It might not be better, but it would be different. And it may be that that is what Jesus was doing. Perhaps slightly less animated than I just was, but perhaps not. And then the next story he tells them is one that is also hard to hear. And, it's got images of slavery in it, which is hard to hear, but the essence of it is pretty clear. The essence is, if you had children, or you had employees, or you had anyone whom you oversee, and you told them, okay, here's your to-do list, this is what needs to happen, and then these other things also need to happen when you're done. If you saw them halfway through finishing their to-do list, and they had managed to do it, and they had managed to do it on time, and they had managed to do it, sufficiently, would you give them an award? You might pat them on the back and say, oh, good job. You did what you were supposed to do. I'm glad you got through half your to-do list so far, and it's 3 p.m. And then you might say, okay, now do the other half. Good job. Keep going. Don't stop. Now, if that person was chronically late with all of their assignments and a terrible accomplisher of to-do lists, you might give them a firmer pat on the back. Good job. This was a great effort. I know you can do it. I know you can finish the rest of that list. But you'd still make them finish the rest of the list. You'd still hold them accountable. You would not put up a statue in the city center. You would not lavish them with attention and awards. And I had a moment like this. It was one of those odd situations in life where I went to a dinner party. And it wasn't a super huge dinner party. It was just a little small dinner party. And there were children there because, some of the people had small children. And I very quickly got roped into playing with the children. Now this is fine because I also can be a child at heart. And since I don't want to have any children of my own, I really enjoy playing with other people's children and then handing them back after 2 hours. This to me is wonderful. So these particular children, aged 4 and 6, had just been given a wonderful gift from grandma or possibly an aunt because they're the children of sci-fi geeks. And they thought, these kids are little, but they're going to grow up just like their parents. They're going to love science fiction. They're going to love fantasy. So they gave the 4 and 6-year-old Tolkien's Illustrated Encyclopedia to everything Tolkien has written. And you might think to yourself, is that appropriate for a 4-year-old? Who knows? And so once they had figured out that I had read The Hobbit, and they think everything Tolkien wrote is called The Hobbit, so it's just, it's an umbrella term for them. Have you read The Hobbit? Yes, okay. They grab Tolkien's Illustrated Encyclopedia and pull it over and open a page randomly and says, is that a good guy or a bad guy? Pointing at an illustration. We spent the next hour starting from that page and going to the end of the Illustrated Encyclopedia. And every single picture, a small finger pointed at it and said, is that a good guy or a bad guy? And so I proceeded to discuss every single picture that was from about 1/3 of the way in to the end. Happily, it was an encyclopedia, so where my knowledge failed, I could just read. And I was totally ahead of them because they couldn't quite read. So that's fine. And very quickly in this process, I'm sitting down, I've got an adult beverage in one hand, I've got a glass of gazpacho in the other, the adults are like, how you doing, you okay? Like, no, it's fine. Because we were there at my husband's best friend's house, and I think to myself, I'll play with the kids so my husband can actually have quality time with his best friend. This is fine. But very shortly, a little person is sitting on my right leg. And I'm kind of trying to juggle the gazpacho and the book and the small child and the adult beverage, and it's a little tricky. And then very shortly, the other child, who informs me that she's 1 pound lighter than her brother, in case I wanted to know, and I thought to myself, this is apropos of what? And then she gets on the other leg, and I thought, oh, that's why you're talking about how much you weigh. And so very soon, I can barely read the writing because the book's way over here sitting on the table, kind of flat, and we're having this conversation. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because several days later on social media, the mother of these small children is telling stories about how her youngest child is asking her to be a character from Tolkien so he can, conquer her because he wanted her to be a Balrog. Mommy, will you be a Balrog? Just for pretend. That's a bad guy, in case you were curious. And her friends are laughing and joking, and then we see a bunch of Smurfs lined up facing a large foe, and I'm just like, ooh, I recognize that scene from Tolkien, obviously. It was obviously played by Smurfs. And, these sorts of things. And she gets all of these kudos. You're such a good parent. You spend so much time with your kids. She's like, actually, the award goes to the dinner guest of the year, Sarah and Michael. And I blithely joke, well, I'd like a plaque, please. I should like to have dinner guest of the year. But it's a joke, because in fact, I'm not going to get dinner guest of the year. In fact, I was just doing the thing you would do. I was just doing the kind thing the reasonable thing. I was treating the children with respect. I was following their interests. We actually ended up having a fantastic ethical conversation about whether or not Shelob was inherently evil. It was great. I'm showing my nerd colors, I realize that. But I wasn't doing anything other than a reasonably responsible adult would do in that situation. And the next time it happens, I'm going to do it again. Because that gives my husband some social time with his best friend. And he needs that. He needs that to stay sane. And this is a little bit of what Jesus was talking about. We don't get awards for being good people. We might get a pat on the back. We might get a good job. Thanks for taking one for the team. But in fact, we're just asked to do what we're asked to do. And it may come with its own rewards. I got to talk about Tolkien with small children for an hour and a half. It was awesome. And yet, would I have appreciated some adult conversation in that time? Might have done. But it's okay. And the followers of Jesus, and we see this in other places of the gospel, they wanted awards. They wanted awards for being persistent. They wanted awards for following him no matter what. They wanted recognition. And gosh golly, they wanted to be the most important ones among his other followers. And he addresses this in other places of the gospel. And every single time they ask for preferential treatment, for special treatment, he tells them no. You and I, we don't get preferential treatment for doing what's right. We don't get special awards for doing what's right. Occasionally out in the world we might actually have our efforts recognized, and that's exciting. But the average person is not going to get a statue out in the middle of the Warsaw Circle. Like that honor goes to one person and it's already done. And they're not going to replace it with a picture of you. And they're not going to replace it with a picture of me either. For the average person, we just need to do what we need to do. And that is true no matter who we are, no matter how we go, and no matter what we do. Amen.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Sometimes a sermon can lift us up, and sometimes it can leave us thinking. And sometimes we can walk away seriously challenged. This is totally normal, and you're not alone. We're supposed to be comforted and challenged by God in turns. And today may be your turn. See you next time.